I have such a core group of incredible humans around me. That's my recovery today, right? It's like I go to therapy. I love therapy. Where there's breath, there's hope, because like my family had accepted that I was going to die or just not be the same because of my use, and now all of us are sober.
Stories are powerful.
Welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast, brought to you by The Phoenix. This is a space where people impacted by substance use can come to share their story of strength and resilience, get open and honest, and inspire hope and build community through shared experience.
We'll be talking to people in our community on their own recovery journey and shine a light on the topic of recovery in all its forms. Maybe you'll hear some of your story in theirs.
Let's show the world that together we rise, recover, and live.
Hey, welcome back to the show. This is Liz. Really excited for you to hear this beautiful conversation with Tiffany, who is so generous to share her story with us today. As always, our top priority is safety and keeping this space supportive. There are some areas of this conversation that we wanted to make sure you were aware of before you proceed into the episode. During this talk, we do mention suicide ideation, there is mention of human trafficking, and of course we talk about substance use. So if any of those areas feel unsafe for you, this might be an episode to skip, and that is okay. If that's the case, we'll see you next week. Otherwise, enjoy the show.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Rise, Recover, Live, the podcast. I am your host, Bryce III.
And I am Liz McKean. How are you doing, Bryce?
I am good. How's your energy, Liz?
My energy is, really good. It's been a busy day, and it's been a busy, I don't even know, month, year. So it's like I feel like I haven't checked in on it in a while. So so it's still under review, I would say. How about yours?
My energy is good. Today, I think, was a good day. A good friend of mine has been challenging herself. She just quit vaping. And in that energy, I kind of got caught up in that energy. Like, I want to challenge myself too. So I got up, took the kids to school, which is like at like 5:45. And instead of coming home and taking a nap, I stayed up and meditated and read my book. And so it felt good. It felt like I wasn't like trying to catch up with myself today. So yeah, it's been cool.
That's awesome. Well, you seem very centered. I think it definitely is. It's translating. So that's cool. I'm glad you did that for yourself.
Okay. All right. I might want to replicate this then. Huh? Well, who we got with us today?
Oh my gosh. I'm excited about our guest today. So today we have Tiffany Foster, who probably gave us the coolest bio I've ever been so honored to be able to introduce someone with. So I'm just going to go for it because I could not say it any better. So Tiffany is a proud woman in recovery, a former substance abuse counselor, and newly CFL2 and senior program manager at the Phoenix. I knew I liked her. She's a lover of dogs, also desserts and CrossFit and tattoos. 2 of her dogs are named after desserts, Donut and Churro, which is the cutest thing I ever heard in my life. And another has the same name as a CrossFit hero wad, which is Murph. So we're definitely going to have to hear more about dogs. But for now, welcome, Tiffany. Thank you for being here. We're so excited to chat with you today. How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm good. Super excited to be here. And yeah, just grateful.
We're excited to have you. And how is your energy?
My energy is excited and grateful, really. Like, that intro is all of the things that I love. My life today is not in my wildest dreams what I expected it to be. So immense gratitude is like that's what I'm rolling with for like the new year. Just gratitude.
Love that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So with gratitude, do you ever find yourself, even though like we've had the experience of being in a deficit and being on the other side of the tracks, like now, like with that, because like literally, like there's borrowed time here for me. Like at least that's how I tend to look at it. It's like, yo, like there was, I don't even know why, I made it on the other side of a lot of the experiences that I had. So just waking up should, hit me like bricks on my shoulders as to how much I have to be grateful for. But do you ever find yourself getting caught up still and having to remind yourself to be grateful?
Yeah, and that's where I am right now. So like it's like an action step for me on a daily basis. I shouldn't be here. like the lifestyle that I lived. And I often have to like take a step back and remember that. And I've been doing that a lot lately. So like my sobriety date is October 26, 2013. And like once it comes upon those winter months, like all of those like first time experiences sort of come back, whether it's holidays, even like the smell of cold, right? Because I was homeless, getting up and going to my car in the morning and like that initial chill, I can feel that in my bones as if like I was still out there, Yeah. So through like the first couple months of winter, it's hard. Winter's hard. I live in Boston. So winter is rough. But it makes me take conscious action in my own recovery and gratitude and all of that. Because like when it's nice and everything's great, like that's when things get taken for granted, right? Like when everything's fun and like when the tough months come and holidays and all of that, that's where like I still have to take action.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody always does. Every time I come around to a birthday, I too got sober in 2013, and every time we get back around there, somebody tells me, "Now the real work begins."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Shut up!" But it's
Shut
true.
up.
But it's true. It's like every day we wake up, it's like, oh, now the real work begins. Like it's a process of practice.
Yeah.
Let's kind of get into it. I would just ask the question, like, tell us a bit about your story and whatever is evoked by that question, just kind of go there with it.
It's been a little while since like I've shared my story, and like I found the past couple weeks it's been like a more upfront, like some way or another I've been sharing little pieces of it, whether it's in the gym in Boston just with somebody like one-on-one, like sharing that little bit of hope of like where I came from. Quite literally, I lived outside of the Boston gym. Like I was homeless in the streets of Boston at a very young age. I was like 25 when I got sober. Probably about 21 to 25, I was in and out of institutions, whether it be treatment centers, jails, the streets, wherever. And like that, it was pretty normal for me. Like in my head, I thought like the people walking to work with like briefcases and everything, they were strange to me, right? The way that I grew up, both my mom and dad were in and out of recovery. There's some mental illness in my family. My dad went to prison when I was 7 and got out when I was 17. He paralyzed a woman drunk driving, his 7th DUI. I knew that like something was off in my family, right? I knew about substance use disorder. I knew about recovery. I grew up in between like bars and AA meetings, so I knew both worlds existed. What I didn't see was like somebody get sober and stay sober. So I didn't know it was like an option, right? When I was 17, my dad got out of jail and he got an apartment in Revere, and I had like a bedroom there, and we started building our relationship as much as like that can happen at that age, right? Like he still knew me as a 7-year-old, and I didn't know him at all. 6 months later, he overdosed and died. Like, so at that point, it was during like the OCs and all that, the start of the opioid epidemic, and I was like using. It was still kind of fun, right? I was still like able enough to scrounge up enough money and go tanning. Still like hanging out with friends, and then like when he passed, it was like all bets were off, right? Because that was this is it. People don't get better,
Any little last shred of hope was just taken right out from underneath you. Yeah.
at that point, like my mom was deep in her addiction, and so was I, just in a different way. And like we used drugs and sold drugs together, and it went really downhill from there. Me and my mom couldn't even interact with each other, right? Like we used different drugs. Imagine that dynamic of of trying to live in a household like that, and I was on my own. So I was 18, and I mean it was whatever boyfriend I could attach to, or whatever. Like I changed my drugs and behaviors with like the people I was around. I was a chameleon, right? I knew how to get my needs met, and my needs were to not feel. And to do that, I had to seek any and all substances. And that is the way that I used it. Everything was transactional. Every relationship I had was transactional, including like with family, just to get your needs met. And at that time, I was like 18, got wrapped up in like some human trafficking stuff, right? Because that like, and when I hear that word, right, like I think of the movies and like what you see in the movies, like it that's not what it is, right? Like it's it's somebody exploiting something, you, for something you need, right? So whether it's a place to stay, whether it is a substance, whether it is whatever it is, like that is human trafficking. And I didn't know that for a really long time. I just thought it was like, and when I would tell my story, I'd say like, I did everything and anything to get what I needed, right? And I would never touch on that, but like it's real, it's a thing, it still happens, it's happening everywhere. And like there's such a different kind of stigma attached to that. I think like at the Phoenix, we want to destroy stigma, right? We want to smash stigma, and like, but there's like a whole nother level in addiction of stigmas there, right?
Oh yeah.
I wound up in some really dark places, and at a young age, like when people say,
I hear donut and churro.
yeah, that is donut. When people talk about like getting sober at an early age and like how difficult that must have been, I'm like, it was and it wasn't, right? Because like I didn't just drink on the weekends and black out a couple times, right? Like by the end of my active addiction, I didn't have it in me to hustle up $40 for my drug of choice, and I was like drinking a bottle of hand sanitizer so like I could lose consciousness. I did not want to be conscious, right? Like the things that I was doing to get the things to make me not feel, right? Like it wasn't even covering it up anymore.
Incredibly, like it's amazing, like looking back how resourceful we are, and driven, like goal driven. Like it's like you could write up a whole resume of those kind of catchphrases. It's just, pointing in a direction that's just so full of pain.
We had, I think it was with man, and he's probably listening to this episode and he's gonna beat me up because he's a good guy, and it was like one of my favorite episodes ever. And I'm really stalling right now so I can figure out his name. What's Sound Bowls?
Oh, Kelvin?
Yeah, Kelvin. On the Kelvin episode.
I can't imagine Kelvin beating you up, Bryce. I think you're safe. It's like the most enlightened human.
on that episode, I think we talked a bit about how people are doing research now where Tylenol can be shown to alleviate heartbreak symptoms. And the reason we brought it up is because of our tendency, at least my tendency, I can speak on me, like my tendency to want to fill whatever hole I feel with something to help me get away from it, get rid of it, get it off me, not have to experience it. Even now, 9 years in, like, and I say 9 years in just to, I guess, bring about the substantial nature of this being a practice.
Yeah.
But I'm a baby, like, and there's definitely ways where I'm learning to show up for frustration, grief, fear, anxiety, and not have to throw something else at it. We talk harm reduction. So of course, if you're doing crazy drugs and then you start doing workouts, eh, it's harm reduction. But eventually, like, health would have you have that conversation with yourself. Like, what am I still not looking at it? Like, am I still like overdoing it? And how you said, like, I was looking to black out. I was looking to numb it. Like, but nothing I was doing was even doing it. But I just didn't even want to be conscious.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we'll find that, like, there's, like, life is life. Either we can show up for it or we can't. And I know for me, like, I was not able to. And my favorite promise of recovery for me is being able to show up for life on life's terms. Having had the experience of not being able to show up for life on life's terms, what point did you get to where it was like, yo, something got to shake, something got to change?
Yeah. There was an actual, like, specific day moment, that whole, like, we talk about your aha moment or your moment of clarity. And, like, I believe that throughout my active addiction, I had little moments of clarity. Like, there are some things that I don't know how, but they're like, they stick out in my memory. And I know, like, each and every one of those moments led up to the final moment where I was like, oh, something's got to give. And it was October. I was in Franklin Park in Boston. I had found a mattress in the woods that was my home base. I had a sleeping bag, and I had a guy that was next to me because it isn't safe to sleep in the woods by yourself as a female in Boston. Always had this, I called them like victims in my active addiction, is what it was, right? They weren't boyfriends. They weren't like, I had people that I attached to and used up. I woke up that morning and I had frost on me, frost on my body. And I went to like wake this person up and he didn't move. And it was probably like only a couple seconds, right? But like a chain of thoughts went through my head. And the first one was like, oh my God, he's dead. And then the second one was like, I can't even call for help. I don't have a phone. If I could call, I have warrants, right? Like, and then it switched very quickly to me because, selfish, like immediate
self-preservation.
Yeah.
I mean, you're trying to,
Yeah.
It's very human.
Oh my goodness. If I died out here, like nobody would know. He knows maybe my first name if I gave him the right one, right? My family, I'm a missing person because when I use, right, like my family, the people that love me who don't want me to use are the enemy. So I don't contact them. They haven't heard from me in 2 weeks since the last time I called them for like money or a ride, right? And then like the final thought was, I don't want to die. And that was like the first time I thought that in a really long time, like a really long time. And at that point, like I say this, but like I had burnt so many bridges that if I was walking towards my mom on a sidewalk, she'd probably cross the street. Like I had done some damage. She was sober at the time. And I don't know, I walked down to the train station where I would usually go beg for money to get high. And I asked somebody for a phone and I called my mom and she answered. And I don't know if it was something in my voice or what it was, but she said, if you can get here, you can come home. And anybody that knows Massachusetts, it's like really difficult to get from Boston to New Bedford. I don't remember how I did it. I got there, took 3 days of calling around trying to get into treatment. And when I finally did, my mom like paid my ex-boyfriend to bring me all the way to like the other end of the state. And that was the last time I went into treatment. And I didn't know it was the last time. I had been Section 35, which is a civil commitment, like a judge sentences you to treatment because you're a danger to yourself and everyone else for 30 to 90 days. And I had been on 15 of those to a treatment facility 7 times, and all the other times they sent me right to a state prison. So I had gone into treatment about 100-ish times, just like detox, spin cycle, when things got tough. I'd been to 7 halfway houses, all of this up until this point, and like nothing was different. It was cold, right? Like I had a thought that I didn't want to die, and that was enough.
That's huge. Like that's a really, I think, I've had this conversation with my husband, who is not a person who has experienced addiction and who hasn't, had as many struggles with mental health as pretty much anybody that I know. He's like this very mentally stable person. It's wild. I don't understand it. But, we've talked about, he's kind of like in passing when we've, heard about someone dying from suicide or just like having even those thoughts, and he's just expressed how great, like that's just great, like I can't imagine experience it would never come to that, like I would never like and even I've heard folks talk about it being selfish, and I think if you've never experienced it, you only know that narrative. You only know what that feels like, and you only know what the society tells us to think about that, and there's so many of us who we just hide it, that's something that so often it's, that we hear of someone no longer being with us and having almost like a moment of jealousy, of like, I woke up this morning and it's just, I have to do this all over again. And that's not even just confined to the years of active addiction in my experience. And anytime that moment comes where it's like, I'm so glad I'm here. Like, I'm so glad I'm alive. Like I get to see the sun rising this morning. And then especially in the thick of it, to be like, I don't want to die. Like that's, like I could feel that in every, like my core, just like is just can physically feel what a big deal that is. And then you listened to it, and then you made the effort to make the call, and then you spent the 3 days getting there, and then you took all that other time that it took to be able to get into treatment. Like so often we have that moment, and then that moment passes if it gets too hard, and then we're on to the to just numbing it again. And I think that just is such a testament to how much you really are supposed to be here,
Yeah, that's one of the things that really just spoke to me too, that 3 days. That 3 days of searching for treatment. Like, I've seen so many opportunities to strike while the iron is hot kind of get wasted, and then people are out of there, just because it's like, you know what, I changed my mind. You know what, it wasn't that bad. Let me go back to where it was comfortable and where it was that I come from and what I've been doing. And for me, like I called and they had one bed available that day. And that's always been like a question that I don't meditate on it too long. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, but it's just like, what if they didn't have a bed and I had to wait? Like how
would you have?
Yeah.
I've left a lobby of a detox because like they were taking too long to get me intake. Like left my bags there and just left, It was my time. Like the pain was for sure great enough. And like I said, it was multiple things leading up to that. Like on one of those sections I was on, and I am a huge advocate for Section 35s in Massachusetts. Like I believe every time I was forced into treatment, my life was saved every single time. Like
what is Section 35?
It's a civil commitment, so you're mandated to treatment. It can be when I was getting sectioned in 2012, 12 and 13, they extended them to up to 90 days.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was 30 to 90 days. And even when I would get sent to Framingham State Prison, it was a women's state prison, there wasn't treatment there. There was literally 3 hots and a cot, but like my life was saved from something during that time. And whether it was somebody I met there, whether it was a CO looking me dead in the eyes and being like, Foster, again, you were out 2 weeks. Like, what are you doing? Whether it was an interaction like that or when I had road rash on my face, like looking me dead in the eyes and telling me, like, when are you going to give yourself a break? Like, all those things, like, registered.
So stories are very
Mm.
important. I'm a true believer in stories. And I think the most important story is a story that we tell ourselves. And I know as people in recovery, we tend to have a lot of opportunity to tell our stories. And I've listened to millions of stories. I don't know if it's millions, but I've listened to quite a few stories. And there's always the commonality between these stories that there's these little instances that may have not have been what caused a person to stop doing what they were doing, but was significant for that point in time. And it was like the straw on the camel's back, but not necessarily the straw that broke the camel's back. So that final straw is a culmination of all the straws, of all the experiences, of all those nurses, of all the people who showed up, of all the heartbreak and all this in that one moment, you know, and it's less of like one thing. And just one day and it was more like, you know, the whole fell out the bottom of the bucket. Like I could no longer carry this water. I think it's super interesting, and it also speaks to like you sharing your story. Like sharing your story on this platform or anywhere might be the thing that sticks to somebody where it's like, man, you know, that might not be the thing that stops somebody, but that'd be the thing. Like, I remember Tiffany was sharing her story and she had said this and this, and it really stuck with me. And then I kept going, but you know, it really stuck with me. It's like we never know how we affect each other and what are those little straws on each other's backs.
And it's those humanizing moments, I feel like, too, just those that are the straws like that. I love that metaphor. We're big fans of metaphors around here. It's just like if all those things that you mentioned were, you know, people, you know, somebody that was like looking you in the eye, somebody that was, you know, believing you enough in you enough to be, you know, a little pissed that you were back, you know, like, I mean, I'm sure glad that you were there and not another place that you could have been, but like, you know, all those little acts of kindness, all those moments of seeing someone as a person, you know, no matter what, you know, is happening in that moment that you wish that was different. You know, I think it's like I just had a conversation with someone recently who had given someone who was living on the street near where they lived, they gave them $20 and they felt real good about it for a minute. And then they saw that person walk into a liquor store and they were like, oh, what a waste. They were so disappointed. They were so upset. They didn't make a difference. They made it worse. I was like, bro, it is not your job to decide what they do with that $20. You saw them and you smiled at them and you gave them something. And that's like, I mean, whatever, like, that builds up, like, you know, people, like, you saw somebody and you treated them like a person, like they mattered enough to be helped, and like that's still, it's a big deal. And so that makes me think of all those looking in the eyes moments are big.
Yeah, real quick, because right before I want to ask this next question, but there's also like a straw phenomenon on this side of the fence too, but it's more like bricks, right? So now there's little things that I take from books or from conversations or from people sharing their story with me or from community or from experiences that now are the building bricks towards my house of wisdom. Now I don't have to run from life anymore. Like I can show up for life on life's terms. And in that, I'm picking these experiences up and building this house of wisdom. Like who I am today is built upon the bricks of, you know, a lot of like me falling on my face. And this is in recovery. Like there's no substances involved, but like I'm learning how to live, you know? And so it's like, I think we're always collecting something. I think there's always like either an unwillingness or a willing process of like collecting or at least experiencing life in such a way that builds us up. So now you're in treatment for the last time, and you've traded in the pain and the heartbreak and the agony of being out and about for the rawness of no longer numbing up. What was that experience like?
It was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. Every time I spoke, even like a couple words, my voice would shake. You know, like I didn't know how to human. I didn't know how to human whatsoever. And the one thing I did different, I remember in that treatment center that I was sectioned to multiple times, called Women's Addiction Treatment Center. I lead programming there now, which is like, just like fills my soul to the absolute top. There was a bumper sticker on one of my case managers' like closet, and it said, "Speak even when your voice shakes." And like that's what I just started doing. I stopped hiding behind people and behind like books, right? Like I would just go into treatment and read books and like try to escape. Even still, like even with a book, I was trying to escape my reality. But like just in groups, I let people start to get to know me. Maybe it was like who I wanted to be that day because I didn't know who I was, right? Like I had so
you were getting to know you too.
Yeah. But like I just started allowing people to know me. I stopped flying under the radar. I started like taking suggestions of people that knew more than me. Instead of I had this habit of like attaching to somebody who I thought was sicker than me, right? Because they make me look better. I started like seeking out those people that were, you know, doing something different. I went to a whole nother area. The halfway house I went to, they were like, "There's a horse farm and there's a garden and you can learn to knit." And I was like, no, I'm not going to do those things. But I chose that halfway house. It was close to New Hampshire, and I had some warrants there that I wanted to clear up. Maybe I was going to go on another run, whatever. I don't know. I just thought it was a good opportunity. And what happened was in New Hampshire, you can't like just go turn yourself in on a bench warrant. You have to go get arrested. I called and they were like, "You have a $30,000 cash bail." And I had this incredible counselor. And she was like, "Listen, we're not going to make you do anything, but like, this is what it is. If you want your life to get better, we have to deal with the wreckage of our past. We'll hold your bed. They can't keep you forever." Like, you know, it was funny enough, it was a marijuana charge, which is now all legal, right? But I like made a decision to go turn myself in from this halfway house where I was like safe. I had probably like 60 days sober. And I went and I was there for a week. I like pled out to a misdemeanor charge. They gave me a lawyer, paid a fine, and they released me. But while I was there, I wasn't treated like crap by the police because I showed up and didn't treat them like crap. They like allowed me to bring a book into the holding cell because I asked politely, right? I didn't detox from anything. I slept pretty good for being in a jail cell. And once they transferred me to the county jail, I had a roommate and she was detoxing so bad. She was so sick and she had open wounds on her body. And she told me it was from shooting Wellbutrin, which is like a psychiatric medication. I looked at her and I was like, "Why?" And again, looked me dead in my eyes. That's like a huge thing for me if you haven't noticed. And she said, "Because it's all I had." And like at that moment, I knew exactly what she was talking about. I like felt that in my bones. And I'll never forget that girl. When I was released from that county jail, I got picked up by my roommate at the halfway house, and I walked back in and I got like a hug and welcomed back by 30 women.
Mm.
Right. And I talked about it a little bit before, but like at the end of my addiction, my own mom was like, no, sorry. To be welcomed somewhere for the first time in a really, really long time, and like, we're so glad you're here, was the moment where I was like, all right, this recovery thing can't be that bad. Right? Like, it can't be that bad. And I dove in and I did what people told me to do.
What does recovery look like for you now? And what community spaces, places, things have helped you to get there?
I wound up going back to school to be a substance abuse counselor, and I worked at that house that saved my life for 2 years. During all of that time, I was huge 12-step member. Went through my steps 2 times, had a couple different sponsors, found my people in those meetings. I heard my story. I believed that they had been where I was and that I could be where they were. For me, recovery, just thinking back, right? Even through my active addiction, I would use up one substance, move on to another, right? I got bored quickly. I needed new things, new spaces. And in recovery, I found not that I got bored, but I needed more and more and more, right? Adding different things on, just like drugs, more and more and more. See a theme here.
I think we have a lot of words for bored. I feel like whenever I hear someone in our community use the word bored, it's like, I know where you're at. Yeah. It's like a different meaning than I think maybe my husband might use it.
Yeah. So my recovery had a flow and a journey like that. When I was working at that halfway house, I was about 5 years sober, still active, super active in my 12-step community. I started showing up to meetings, and mind you, I'm a full-time student. I'm volunteering for the Phoenix 2 nights a week, coaching CrossFit, working 40 plus hours because overtime, and still trying to hit my meetings. And then I'm showing up at meetings and there's 5 or 6 of my clients in the meetings. And not that, so it's a little bit different when it's not peer to peer, right? When you're a substance abuse counselor, I can't always share butterflies and rainbows, right? I'm going through it sometimes. And I shared one night and got really raw, and I walked into work the next day and one of the girls was like, "Oh my God, Tiffany, are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm here for you. You can't." It was just a weird, I didn't want a client of mine that I'm trying to help. It's my job to help, worried about my feelings. What if she really had some heavy stuff that day and didn't bring it
want to
to
burden
me
you
because I was going through it myself. So I had to reevaluate some things, and I found myself at a crossroads where I didn't have my support network that I had for years, and I was like, what do I do now? And I had heard about Recovery Dharma, which is a Buddhist inspired approach to recovery and meditation. And I love meditation. It's been a part of my recovery from day 63 or something. I don't know. It took me a little while to get a minute worth of meditation under my belt, but once I did and realized I could slow my monkey mind down a little bit, it was game over. But I sought out other avenues, and I was a volunteer for the Phoenix, so I was like, we should bring this Recovery Dharma here to Lowell, and initiated a meeting and brought people in, and for me, but also for the community. The fellowship that I went to was like early in my recovery, like sit down, shut up. If I want to know where to get high, I'll ask you. Like you don't have anything to share right now. So, and that's what I needed at that time. 5 years in, I was like, I kind of know some things. I kind of trust my intuition a little bit. Like this isn't my disease talking. This is my intuition. And I wanted to go deeper. So I sought more like meditation and spiritual people in my life. And that's really it. Like you asked where it is today. I have such a core group of incredible humans around me that like that's my recovery today, right? It's like it looks really different. It looks really different than it did in the beginning. I go to therapy. I love therapy. Mind blowing. I was always, and it took me a while. So I've been in the same relationship since I was 18 months sober. We've grown together and in different ways. And we broke up for 6 months. And I had to do some digging around, like I talked about transactional relationships, right? Like that is all I've ever known. Intimacy, right? Does not just mean like sex. It's intimate relationships. I have to let people see me and know me. And because of trauma of like human trafficking and all of that, like I was showing up in not a great way. And he was showing up in not a great way. And we had to separate for a little while and like come back together. I did a support group called Ending the Game. It's like a survivors group. So you dig in on a lot of that stuff. And I got a therapist and he got a therapist. And like when you talk about what does your recovery look like today, it's like digging in on my intimate relationships with everyone, right? Because like I've always heard you can't love yourself or you can't love others until you can love yourself. And like I don't truly believe that. I think through loving other people and empathy, you learn to love yourself. And like that's where my recovery is today. It's like that next level of the onion, if you will.
It's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. And thank you for sharing your journey with us and the whole you can't love others if you don't love yourself. I rock with the saying. But I've learned there's not a black and white thing that I can find in recovery. Like everything is swirled together, and like sometimes like I can't just grab something and like, okay, well this is the only rule I need to live by. Can't love others as much as you love yourself. So it's me all day, baby. Don't talk to me, don't call me. You know, like I can really go like
We're in
super
couples
extreme.
therapy, me and myself.
But yeah, a lot of the stuff you share, I can relate to. I'm sure our listeners can relate to as well. I think that process of learning how to show up for ourselves, of learning how to build community, of learning how to get around people who are in alignment with where it is that we want to go and are representative of our future versus our past. Being willing and having the humility to allow for something unlike we've ever experienced to come into our lives. Like when that group of women came and embraced you, I'm sure that was quite jarring, especially in contrast to the experience that came beforehand. But the fact that you was like, because you said, this recovery thing can't be that hard. But I've also heard after people have been cold and shut off for so long, like that love, that embrace is like, what do you want? Like, this is too much. Like and we'll send people running, and you decided to go through the door of what it is that you hadn't experienced yet. And that takes being humble. And I think it's the requirement. I think it's the requirement for continuous growth is humility and showing up for ourselves. And so, no, I got a lot from your story, and I'm glad you came to share it with us today.
Thanks, Tiffany. I agree. I think so much of what I just want to, first of all, echo on its own how grateful I am to have heard your story and to be part of it being shared with the community. I know you've shared it before, but every time I know it for me, I think for most of us, it comes out a little bit differently. It feels a little bit different because every single day is a little bit different. So thanks for sharing exactly as it is today and for using the language that works today. Because I think a lot of that is like, it's language. It's finding words to define the things that we've experienced, that sometimes takes the power away from them, sometimes gives the power back to us, sometimes helps us to like take that next step. If like you have no idea how to love yourself or anybody else, like you can't just, it's not something we just know how to do, maybe when we're tiny little babies, like, but that gets learned out of us pretty quickly as far as like what comes naturally. So yeah, so thanks for sharing that whole journey, because that's just going to give somebody else that little light bulb moment. And there's a lot of people that I talk to. I teach at a treatment center too, and somebody will come in and be like, "Oh my God, this is never going to work. I've been in here 5 times, and it's like, and you made your way back, like there is, and like they see you or see, anybody. They just need those little kind of shreds of light, those extra little evidence that there is hope.
Yeah. Something that I share with like family members, anybody in treatment, is where there is breath, there is hope. Because like my family had accepted that I was going to die or just not be the same because of my use. And now all of us are sober.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So maybe there's a family member out there listening too right now. I feel like we have a lot of those, and just to hear that we do recover. Like, what a miracle.
So to take us out, Liz, why don't you hit us with the question?
Oh, sans adjectives today. All right.
Short and succinct.
The pressure's on.
Question.
So Tiffany, you shared so much wisdom and so many beautiful words. So we're going to ask you just for a couple more, because I know you've got them in you. What might you say to a previous version of yourself? What's a message that you might give to Tiffany from another time, knowing that person is probably out there listening right now?
You are not broken.
Mm.
You are not broken. For a long time, I used words like that, like I have a broken brain, and like you are coping the way that you know best, and like it gets better if you give yourself a chance. Nobody's ever broken beyond repair.
Totally agree. Well, that's a beautiful way to end. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, this is one of my favorite conversations. Thank you, Tiffany, for being here. And thanks for Bryce for being here too. It's always so fun to be on this with you.
And thanks for Liz for being here as well.
You're so welcome. Well, and thank you, listeners, for showing up. We're so grateful for every single person that we get to do this with, because we're doing this together. As always, if you haven't already, please be sure that you subscribe on whatever podcast listener you're listening on, so you don't miss a single episode. If you would be so kind to rate, to review, let folks know what you think about this podcast. It's amazing the difference that makes to get it out there to folks who do need to hear it. And if there's someone in your mind and your heart that you think would benefit from this specific conversation, please do send it to them. And how can they get to us, Bryce?
Well, we just be chilling.
We just be chilling.
So you can come find us wherever we chilling at. But
where are we chilling
at? Most often, we chill in the podcast community group on the Phoenix app. So once you download the Phoenix app and you get in there, there'll be a whole bunch of different groups, and there's groups varying different interests. Music and plants in the UK, because I'm gonna get there eventually, are like my 3 top favorites right now that I'm keeping an eye on, and Louisiana, because I just came from New Orleans, and Detroit, because come on now, I'm from Detroit. But
Bryce is in all the groups.
I'm like in like 20 groups. But if you go in there and join the podcast group, the Rise, Recover, Live podcast group, then pop in there and come tag me or Liz and tell us what you think about this podcast episode, or what you think about the show, or what you want to hear more of, or what you want to hear less of. We just want to hear from you. So come in there and catch us, Liz and I, chilling in a podcast group on the Phoenix app.
We'd love to chill with you. All right. Well, thanks again for being here. We'll see you next week, and take care of yourself. Take care of each other. See you next time.
See ya.
So now you're excited. Bryce, Liz, how do I get involved with the Phoenix? Well, my friend, it is super simple. We actually have an app. Head over to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or look in the show notes of this podcast, wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, and go download the Phoenix app.
The Phoenix app makes it so easy to find classes that are near you or to access our virtual class schedule where you can hop on from the comfort of your home. You can also join our groups and have a conversation with someone from the Phoenix community from anywhere in the world. Please make sure that you join the podcast group where you can connect with Bryce and I and other listeners. Everything that you need is in the show notes. You can also head to our website at www.thephoenix.org. And maybe while you're there, you click the volunteer tab and get even more involved.